When Brian Ritchie and I started the company, one of the things we wanted to do was make a difference. We felt that making money was actually easy and making a difference is very difficult. About 2 years ago, I was visiting a friend of mine who was on his last leg. He was dying. And I asked him what his last wish was. And he said he had been laid up for about a year in bed. And he said, I've been thinking about the problems in the world. And he said, I think the one thing I want to do before I die is take care of some people in places that don't have water. And I'll be honest with you, up until that time, I wasn't quite as aware of how bad that situation is outside the United States in certain places. And so he asked me to promise him that I would do something. And so we have basically today, part of our charity this year will be a group that actually builds water wells for those people that don't have any water. And I'd like to ask Doug Ryan to come on up, and he is with CRS, and he will tell us what he's going to do. Brian Ritchie, you want to come on up here too? First of all, we'll give him some money, and then he'll tell us what he's going to do with it. Lisa, where do you want us to stand? Over here? On behalf of all of us, Doug, we're going to give you $100,000 today for some water wells. Okay. The microphone's yours.
Thank you, Brian.
I'll take the check and I'll hold it for you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is a privilege and a great pleasure, really, to be here with you. You know, just this morning, thousands of women in places like Guatemala and Sudan were rising early, and they were walking. They were walking to find the only source of water available to them. They often walked, if we could get the... They often walk with their daughters, young, at times young children. If they're lucky, they find some firewood and they can boil the water. And if they can't, usually someone gets sick. This act of survival for thousands of women around the world defines and circumscribes, in many ways, their lives. If they're lucky, like Cecilia here from Sudan, to get a bit older, they often experience a great deal of pain for the rest of their lives due to the compression of hauling water on their heads for a long time. My name is Doug Ryan. I work for Catholic Relief Services. We work in 100 of the poorest countries in the world, often in the poorest parts of those countries. I'm here today at the invitation of Brian, and I'm here to thank Brian. And I'm here really to thank all of you in the company for helping us meet a big challenge in the world. I want to talk to you about what that challenge is and why it's so important that we do something about it. I want to talk to you about how we do it, and then I want to tell you what happens when we do it. Dirty water kills children. There's not a nice way to talk about it. There's not a nice way to say it. If it doesn't kill them, usually of things like diarrhea, which is completely preventable, and about 88% of the kids are dying of that, it compromises their digestive system. So they can't thrive, they can't grow, and they often can't learn and be in schools. Women and girls do 90% of that work. They haul the water. What that means is that they're not engaged socially. It also means girls like this often don't have an opportunity to be in school. There are other reasons it's important. We all remember the Ebola crisis. It's somewhat ongoing. With water and sanitation, we solved that crisis. Cholera, Ebola don't spread like wildfire. Drought. In 2012, thousands of people picked up from their villages and they went across this barren landscape in Eastern Africa because they didn't have water. A colleague of mine told me about a woman she watched from a refugee camp coming across alone with a baby in her arms. She entered the camp and just said, "Please." Conflict. There's a scarcity of water all around the world. I'm from California, we're having this problem now. When there's a scarcity of water, there's conflict. When we can do something about spreading access to water, we can lower the tensions. And finally, water is essential for food. It gives people the ability to grow food and to be food secure. So that's why it's important. But let's talk about how we do this. And there are really three basic things. The first thing is CRS doesn't build a single water system in the world. The villagers do it. We provide the expertise. We provide things like that rig in the back. And we train these technicians in building the system and maintaining the system. Sweat equity is a big part of ownership. And once people invest in this, they own those systems and they maintain them. And they'll maintain them for up to 20 years. The second thing is they have to organize. Here's a picture of a typical borehole. That means that we drill down and we get the groundwater. A woman like this in this picture will be on the committee that makes sure the dues are collected so they can buy spare parts and make sure that is kept clean and that is kept running. The third thing we do is sanitation. We don't do water unless we do sanitation. There are 2.5 billion people in the world today who don't have access to a toilet. That's a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for death. So we make sure everywhere that we put these water systems that there's sanitation. I was in Malawi last year, and we're in a Jeep, and we come up around the bend, and there's this huge billboard. And the billboard said, "We declare this village a 100% defecation-free zone." Imagine that. And imagine what happens in these villages when we do that. Kids are healthy. The mortality rates plummet. Girls go back to school. Women get engaged in things like small businesses with microfinance loans. And there's water for food. People feel secure about having their next meal and a source of food that they can grow on their own because of this. When I was in Guatemala several years ago, inaugurating a water system, all these women are standing around. They have clay pots in their heads. And we cut the ribbon, and this clean water comes gushing out. And the women take these clay pots, and they smash them on the ground. And it startled me. And I said, "Why did you do that?" And they said, "Breaking these clay pots is symbolic for us of breaking with our past, a past that's defined by this one act of survival. Now we have water in our village." And they begin to sing. And it's a remarkable thing. It even gives me goosebumps now talking about it. They get a smile on their face. Their children are happy. For me personally, this is one of the single most compelling reasons we do this. You know, all of you and Brian Stevens and this company help put hundreds of girls like this behind a desk and into school. Imagine that girl 2 months ago, her life defined by walking for water, has got a pen in her hand, and she's drawing the letters that become the words, that become the poetry of her life. We also train actors in our program. These young kids get back to school, and they thrive. And we can start a process of socioeconomic development. And it's a thing of beauty. One final word. I get into the business that I'm in because I thought about 25 years ago we could solve all the problems of the world. We just have to do this kind of thing. Well, the world's a little bit more complicated than that. I've maintained the optimism, and I've come to conclude basically two things. One, we can make life, even if we can't solve the problems, we can make life a lot easier for people. We can take that situation and turn it around. We have an ability to make her life a lot easier. And with your help, we're doing it. We can't solve all the problems of the world, but this is the one problem, in my experience, that we can solve. We can take this situation and turn it into this. I'm here today to thank Brian on behalf of Carolyn Wu, our president and CEO. I'm here to thank all of you. And from my heart, and like this young girl from Sudan, I thank all of you. Thank you very much.
Working man, I got it all on the line for a piece of the promised land, and I'm burning my candle at both ends. About the only way to keep the fire going is to outrun the wind.
Thank you very much, Doug. That was very powerful.